Hello and welcome to the hit podcast, High Intensity Truth. I'm your host, Eric Ruth. I'm a licensed attorney, and today we are going to be putting Brinn under the gun. She is going to be put under oath, and I'm going to depose her to make sure that she has actually done the work to overcome her trauma. We'll see what she says. Brinn, do you agree? Do you affirm? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? So help you, somebody's God.
Absolutely.
Good. Let's go. Who'd you come out of and where?
I don't think I've ever been asked that question before. So I'm from California, Northern California, and I'm the youngest of four. And happy to share whatever else you want to know.
Okay. Dad in the house?
Yes, he was for limited amounts of time. He traveled a lot for work, and that was definitely a dynamic. And it left my mom with a bunch of kids at home, and we also had a lot of babysitters and au pairs and nannies and things like that coming in to also support at the same time. But
Sure.
my parents divorced when I was 10.
Okay. And where were you at in your sibling rank?
I'm the youngest of four.
Okay. All right. What's your trauma?
My trauma. So I spent a lot of my childhood wondering what was wrong with me. And, there were all these signs, and it really started, a lot of temper tantrums, a lot of emotional dysregulation. And I was refusing to go to school. I had stomach aches all the time. I thought everybody hated me. I had migraines starting in 5th grade and chronic headaches. I was exhausted. And then that evolved into, using substances and smoking weed and drinking at elementary school, and, being really promiscuous and eating disorders, and just spiraled into, self-harm and suicide ideation. And I didn't know what was wrong with me. And that was the big question. It was I came from a loving home. We said, I love you, and gave hugs and kisses. And we went to church, and, we sat down at the dinner table before the divorce happened. And it was when I was 18 that my oldest brother took me out for dinner, and he kind of sat me down and he asked me a question, and that question changed everything. And he asked me, hey, has our brother ever come home high and done anything to you? And that was the question that just changed my life, because the truth was that my brother closest in age with me had been molesting me my entire childhood. So for 12 years, I experienced sibling sexual abuse, and I kind of just compartmentalized it. It wasn't like I blocked it out entirely. I knew what was happening, but it was something I swore I was taking to my grave. There was no way I was ever going to tell anybody what was going on, but it was coming out in all of these ways. And so it finally clicked, oh, everything starts to make a lot of sense. And that's what I do now as a therapist, is I help people understand why everything they do, think, and feel makes absolute perfect sense given everything you've been through in life.
So I want to go back to the manifestation of your trauma. You mentioned before a lot of all of the symptoms already: promiscuity, issues with school. Kind of give me, what were the actual movements of your body inside the manifestation of your trauma, inside your relationships, your profession, your hobbies, every area of your life?
When I was a kid.
When you were a kid, or until you became aware of it and started to change it?
Oh man, it was coming out everywhere. It was I also dealt with, there was physical abuse inside the house. There was also some emotional abuse going on. So I just thought everybody hated me all the time. I thought my friends were pretending to be my friends. I was very impulsive. So, and I would also numb out a lot. So for example, if somebody texted me, and if a guy texted me and he was like, hey, do you want to come over? And it's 2 a.m, I'd be like, yep, I'm coming over. And then I would just numb out. It was almost like my mind would go blank. I'd go into kind of robot mode, and I wouldn't care if my mom's asleep down the hallway, and I wouldn't care. It would just be as soon as I made up my mind, I was doing that. And it was almost like I would go against my intuition a lot. I would have the intuitive thought of ooh, maybe I shouldn't do this. For example, one night I was sneaking out, and I had the clear thought, if you leave out the back gate, you're not coming back in this way. And that, it was clear as day, and it stopped me. And I was like, well, screw it. I'm leaving anyway. Like, there was a lot of that. There was a lot of, and I was right. My intuition was right. That was the night my mom caught me. And that was the night we went, she picked me up in her car and we went back in through the front door, not the back gate.
What was the worst action you've taken inside the manifestation of your trauma that you can look back now and be like, holy shit, how did I let that happen? I can't believe I went that far, that deep.
Getting blackout drunk on a regular basis in college.
How often?
I mean, it was pretty consistent. I partied Thursday through Sunday, and on one of those nights, I was probably getting blackout drunk. And when I got blackout drunk, the worst of it would be if anybody made any sort of criticism towards me or told me to, hey, stop drinking or slow down, or maybe you need some water or something like that. If anything was conceived as me being not good in some way, it would set me off. And sometimes that would result in me physically running away. I physically ran away from multiple situations. It happened at Pride Festival in San Francisco. I was in the crowds of thousands and thousands of people, and I literally took off sprinting away from my friends, totally blackout drunk. There were other times where my boyfriend would try to, calm me down or something, and I would just start thrashing. I would, this one time I was peeing on somebody's lawn, like straight up peeing on somebody's lawn.
Sure.
And, like you do. And he put me in his car, and he's not like yelling at me. He's not, nothing crazy. He's just like, hey, you need to chill for a second. And I throw a temper tantrum like I'm a 3-year-old child. I am thrashing, I'm screaming, I'm hitting, I'm kicking, and I just do that. And he just held space for me. He sat there and he waited it out, and eventually it stopped, and usually resulted in me sobbing and feeling so ashamed and so apologetic. And the next morning, my friends are telling me like, hey, the way you acted like that wasn't cool. And I would shut down. Like, I couldn't say anything. There were times where I literally couldn't speak because my freeze mode of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn would kick in. And I wouldn't have the capacity to say words. And so
Sure.
that was the real manifestation of my trauma that made me take a look at myself and want to make some changes.
Got it. Thanks for sharing that. What was the point of self-awareness? What was your breaking point? When did you finally have the aha moment? I got to change my behavior.
Yeah, it was actually that boyfriend in college who brought it to my attention. We had been together for like 4 years, and we really cared about each other. We were pretty solid in caring about each other as human beings. And so he sat me down and he was basically like, hey, if something doesn't change here, I can't be in this relationship anymore. And for me, I have a lot of anxious attachment. So the idea of somebody leaving me, or, as my inner child would think, abandoning me, I wanted to do everything in my power to try to make that relationship work. And so he was like, yeah, you need to get some help working on like your communication. And he had known about the trauma. So like to him, it was pretty obvious. But to me, I thought, my trauma doesn't affect me. What are you talking about? And so at 22 years old, I made the decision that I was going to start working on this stuff. And I enrolled in an 8-day program, this 8-day intensive leadership program. And it was a program that my oldest brother had gone through and a family friend had gone through. And I kind of knew at some point, like, I'd probably go through it too, because, I admired my older brother, and I knew I had trauma, and I just was busy focusing on other things, getting through college and playing sports and stuff like that. And so when I decided to do it at 22, that's when everything changed. It was like all of a sudden I understood. Everything made absolute perfect sense. I connected in with these different parts of myself, my inner critic that was constantly beating me up, my inner child that was screaming, she felt like she was in a crowd screaming and nobody was listening to her. And so the more attention and care and understanding and compassion I could give to her, the more she could calm down, and the more she was able to just let go of that anxiety that she had been holding on to for so long. And then I really learned how to, strengthen my adult self, the part of me that knew how I wanted to walk in the world, how I wanted to show up. How did I want to show up in my romantic relationships? How do I want to show up in my friendships and in my family and, my career and things like that. So that was really the pivotal moment when I was 22.
Okay. So you become aware of this now. What actions are your body taking, or sorry, what actions are your body undergoing and taking to actually do the work? Not in a conceptual manner, not, you're talking about strengthening and visiting your inner child. What is your body doing to do that work?
Yeah, so the program that I went through was actually very hands-on, and we would do a lot of like deep meditations to connect with these different parts of ourselves, and that's the work that I do today. Yes, I'm a therapist, but I tend to not be so much of a talk therapist. I do a lot of like the really hands-on work. So you talk about the body, right? So like my body would go into these modes, like I was saying, where I couldn't speak, or I would freeze, or I'd run away. And so there was a lot of uncomfortability in my body that I had to start addressing little by little by little. And when I graduated college, my oldest brother, he owned a yoga studio. He owns a couple yoga studios, and he's very into yoga. So I threw myself into yoga. I started working at the yoga studio, and by doing yoga, it was a really amazing way to have my body start to feel safe again. And by tuning in to the movements and linking my breath to it and focusing, I think growing up as an athlete, it was like my body's like a tool. Like I just got to like use it as hard and as much as possible. And I'm going to ignore a lot of the signs that my body is telling me. And that's how I grew up as an athlete. And it's also how I grew up being, dealing with the abuse that I dealt with, was ignore whatever sign your body is telling you and just push through. And so by going through, yoga and linking this with philosophy and spiritual philosophy and also like breath work and meditation and really the combination of that, I started tuning into my body. I started listening to my body, and that really made a huge difference because the body tells us so much. It does tell us when there's danger. It does tell us when we're excited. It does tell us when we want to pull towards something or move away from something. And so that was really a practice that I had to hone over a long period of time. And another thing that was really helpful for me is I started doing a lot of breath work. And breath work is a way to release the pent up energy and emotions that we hold in our body as a result of the trauma. So when we go through something really intense, it actually sticks in our body, and it's in our mind, and it's also in our physical body. So that's why people, if they go to a massage therapist, they might start crying on the massage table. Well, that's because there's actual emotions being released. And same thing with yoga. People go to yoga classes and they'll hold a position and all of a sudden they'll start crying. Well, yeah, you just held a hip opener position, and your hips are where we hold a lot of our emotional trauma. So it makes a lot of sense that you're having these emotional releases. So same thing with breath work. I was doing a lot of breath work. I did a lot of Kundalini yoga, which is a certain specific Kundalini yoga. Kundalini.
What's specific to that?
Kundalini is this energy that is inside all of us, and Kundalini yoga is a practice where you hold a lot of specific poses and you do a lot of specific breath work. You do chanting and mantras and things like that. And the idea is you really challenge yourself on the mat, so then you can go out into the world, and when challenges arise, you have the strength to handle them.
Okay.
So it's like, you're going to sit here and you're going to hold your arms up for, minutes on end. And that's going to be really challenging. And you're going to be doing that as you're doing this breath work. And it's going to be so challenging, but you're showing yourself that you're capable. You're getting out of that mental mind that is saying, I can't do this. My arms are going to fall off. Like, oh my gosh, I'm going to die, but you can keep going. You use your tools, you use your mantra, you use your breath, you use your eye gaze, and then that sets you up for when challenging situations come up in your relationship or at work, or the rest of the world is going on around you and you're stressed out. Well, you can use these tools to then get through whatever challenging situation is coming up in life.
I like it. What did you do to train your mind, quiet your mind, to do work with your mind? You just went through everything you went through with your body. So what are you doing now inside the work to overcome your trauma with your mind?
Yeah, it's all about catching those negative thoughts. Because our mind wants to make sense of things and it wants to keep us safe. So a lot of times, my mind would use our minds in general, use past experiences to try to predict what's going to happen in the future. But we're not in the past. We are in present day. And the reality is, I'm okay and I'm safe. But my mind doesn't know that. My mind still thinks I have like a saber-toothed tiger chasing me, still thinks that I have somebody who's trying to hurt me, right behind me. And so a lot of it is catching the thoughts and noticing, because, we have thousands and thousands of thoughts that go through our head every day. But how many of them are you actually aware of? How many of them do you actually notice? And for a lot of people, a lot of those thoughts are negative. And so if you have a lot of these negative thoughts, then that's going to produce a lot of negative feelings. And if you have a lot of negative feelings, then you're going to be acting and moving through the world based off these negative feelings. So I did a lot of, I have had a consistent meditation practice almost daily for 6 years. And prior to that, I was doing a lot of meditation classes. It took me a long time to do the consistent meditation practice. But before that, I'd been meditating since I was in high school.
What is your meditation like specifically? What are you doing? What are you thinking about? What's your body doing? Where are you sitting? Where are you at? What's going on?
Yeah, so usually I start off by doing a little movement just to get my body, I usually do it in the morning. So just to get my body a little bit loosened up, I'll do a little bit of movement, some forward, just kind of, forward fold. And then I will sit, and I sit cross-legged. For me, it's the most comfortable. And I usually sit on a pillow, and I'll do some breath work. So I'll do some like, and that just whoosh calms the mind. Any sort of breath work will just calm the mind. A lot of people sit down to meditate and they're like, oh, my mind is everywhere, I can't do it. But they're not really using any tools to calm their mind. And so breath work, or I do humming, like, like the quintessential, we think of like Om, right, as a meditator. There's a reason for that.
Okay.
There's a reason we say Om. That's a vibration. So if you just take a moment and feel what it's like in your body to go, you feel vibrations everywhere. You do that like 3 or 4 or 5 times, all of a sudden, there's a relaxation that comes with that. And that's relaxes the mind. So, or I do something called tapping, EFT. This is a really great way to calm the nervous system. And so when you tap on the body, different parts of the body, oh my gosh, we got the little thumb signal. So tapping is a really great way to calm the mind and nervous system also. So I prep my mind for meditation. And then I go in and I put my tongue to the roof of the mouth. I put my gaze at my third eye right there in the forehead center. This activates the pituitary gland, and that locks me in. And as soon as I'm locked in, it's just kind of like, oh, okay. Now my mind's still going. Like, it's not like I'm not, our mind is designed to think. So it's okay that the mind goes. But for me, it's about slowing it down. And then when I slow it down, oh, well, what's coming up? Oh, I'm actually feeling some sadness right now. Okay, can I just sit with that sadness? Okay, now can I visualize my little girl sitting on my lap and me putting my arms around her? And oh, okay, so now I'm recognizing, oh, my inner critic is talking to me. Oh, my inner critic is being really critical about that thing that I have at work later today. Okay, critic, thank you. Yeah, I hear you. I get it. You want me to be prepared today. Got it. Thanks. So there's a lot of like slowing down so I can figure out what's going on with me. Like a lot of times we go through life so fast from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next, but we don't actually slow down to figure out whatever we're feeling, or the way I think about it, which part of us is talking.
Sure.
We just think that those are the things, the scripts in our heads.
What is your current practice? We went over meditation and yoga, but is there anything else in your current practice that you use to maintain your resilience?
Tapping.
Explain that to me. It's kind of, when you did it, I thought of the old, Matthew McConaughey thing there. So what is this?
What's the Matthew McConaughey thing?
Oh, just from the movie, I think The Wolf of Wall Street, he does the he starts pounding on his chest when he's singing the song. Have you seen that scene?
Oh, okay, got it.
In the restaurant, he's giving some like real masculine speech. So I get up in the morning and I jerk off and I go out and I want to do this and do this. And he starts doing the song and he's like thumping his chest in this rhythmic kind of way. That's what it reminded me of when you started doing that, just from the vibration of the thumping.
Right. This might be that might have been.
It's a lot different than what you're talking about, I guarantee.
Yeah, a little different. Yeah. Okay, so EFT, emotional freedom techniques, also known as tapping, because you just tap on yourself. And so tapping is it's kind of a form of acupuncture. So acupuncture, the way it's designed is you take the needle and you put it at certain energy points in your body, and then the pressure of the needle helps release that energy so energy can flow freely. And that is the same thing we're doing with tapping, except we are using our fingers to tap on those energy points as opposed to needles. All right. So basically, if I'm having a super negative thought that, I'm going to go on this podcast with Eric and I'm going to make a complete fool of myself and it's going to be terrible and I'm not going to know what to say and everybody's going to laugh at me, right? So then I would start tapping and I would be like, even though I think everything's going to be terrible, even though Eric's going to hate me, even though don't know what I'm going to say, even though this is going to be horrible, I'm still willing to have peace and love towards myself anyway. But I am so terrified that this is going to happen. I am so horrified that I'm going to mess it up and I'm just going to screw it up because I am just not good enough and I am not somebody who should be on a podcast. Right? So I am actually releasing that energy from me.
And just so everybody understands that's listening to this, as Brinn was doing that, she's tapping herself all over her head or her body, her shoulders, her face as she was talking. Go ahead, Brinn. Sorry. Just for the record, to make sure that's clear.
Thank you. So I'm tapping on certain energy points in the body, and that is helping to release this energy that is in me. And so it's calming my nervous system. And when we calm the nervous system, we feel better, right? So our nervous system is the part of us that tries to keep us safe. And it takes care of all of those things that we don't think about, like our heartbeat and our digestion and our sleep and the hormones and the chemicals that get produced in our bodies when we're stressed or when we're excited or sad or whatever. So when I'm worried about how I'm going to show up on this podcast, that's my nervous system sensing that there's danger. It's like, oh, this podcast is dangerous. And so we're going to give you all of these thoughts to think about as a way to prepare you for the podcast. But if I take all of those thoughts, acknowledge them, verbalize them out loud, and tap on these different energy points to release them, by the time I'm done tapping, I will feel like this podcast is no big deal, and I'm just going to go have a conversation with Eric, and everything's going to flow out of my mouth as it does, and I'm just going to move forward.
Well, awesome. Well, I hope that's exactly what this conversation has been for you. It is clear that you have overcome your trauma, Brinn, and you've done the work necessary to call yourself a trauma survivor and thriver. I got some last few questions for you. You ready?
Yes.
What was the biggest lie that you believed when it came to your trauma?
What was the biggest lie that I believed when it came to my trauma? That I needed something outside of myself to change in order for me to change. Like, I needed him to apologize. I needed somebody to acknowledge. I needed
The external validation.
something outside of me. Mm-hmm.
Love it. What advice would you give to anybody that may be in similar circumstances as the similar trauma you've experienced?
Keep going. Healing is absolutely possible, and healing happens on multiple levels, and you can heal your nervous system, and your nervous system is in charge of most of what's going on for you when you get triggered. And you can heal your nervous system. You can heal these different parts. You can heal your physical body. We are very resilient creatures, and healing is absolutely possible.
All right, be honest on this one. What was the hardest thing about doing the work that you had to do?
Oh, allow myself to feel the feelings.
To experience them?
Yeah. Like, experience the fullness of my rage in a safe way that I could still feel okay with. To feel the full extent of the sadness and the grief, because it comes in layers. And at first you're like, okay, yeah, I'm mad. Sure. And I feel mad. Okay. And then you keep going and you keep going and you keep going, and you realize, oh, I want to like breathe fire. I want to like, scream and have all the windows break. I want to be able to like fully express how angry I am right now. And that can be really scary to people, because they associate that with aggression, and they associate that with bad. I shouldn't be angry, or I shouldn't do this, or if it's scary if that I do. And so I think one of the hardest things is like allowing myself to like go there, and it's so much better when I do.
What would you, or have you, or could you say to the person, place, idea, or thing that you believe caused your trauma?
I mean, for me, I forgive you. And that sounds so cheesy to a lot of people, and it sounds so generic. But for me to be able to look at all of this and understand that it all happened as it did because it did. It's the reality of the situation. And I don't think the people who hurt me had an intention of, I'm going to go out and hurt Brinn right now. I don't think that was true for me. And I think it happened because of emotional dysregulation. It happened because of nervous system responses. It happened because people didn't look at themselves. I think it happened because, people had trauma passed down to them from their parents. My brother was abused, and I know that. And my parents were abused. And And I believe that everybody was doing the best that they could and doing things that helped them feel better in the moment. And those things that helped them feel better were detrimental.
Brinn, as I already stated earlier, it is clear that you have overcome your trauma. The verdict is in. And I hope that you continue to do the work that you are doing. I'm going to get into what your objective is right now, but I just want to say thank you for coming on the show and being vulnerable and sharing your honest truth. And please keep doing exactly what you're doing. So tell me what you're doing, where the people can find you, and what you're up to.
Absolutely. So I am a licensed therapist and a holistic coach. I work with individuals and I help them understand why everything they do makes absolute perfect sense. And then I help give specific tools so they can live the life that they want, regardless of their past and regardless of what's happening around them. So I have lots of offerings. I do monthly workshops. So I have free monthly workshops that are available to anybody where we dive deeper into these different parts of self, like the inner critic, the inner child, and the adult. And so anybody is welcome to attend any of those live workshops. I also have an online community called Perfect Sense, where everything you do makes absolute perfect sense. And in there we have coaching calls and tons of resources. All of the recorded workshops that I've ever done are in there, and you can do a deep dive. There's a meditation library where you can do meditations that connect you with the different parts of yourself, breath work, things like that. So everything from 1-minute meditations to 15-minute meditations. And yeah, I also do speaking events and workshops for organizations, schools, universities, and I have a book coming out this fall, which I'm very excited about. It is my memoir and walks you through my childhood, my healing, and my journey of forgiveness, where I forgave my abusers by my 30th birthday.
Outstanding. Thank you so much, Brinn, and thanks for coming on the podcast. That's it, ladies and gentlemen, for another episode of the hit podcast, High Intensity Truth with me, your host, Eric Ruth. Come back next time and make sure you have a good one.